Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Around the Nation right here, TYT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you on this Monday afternoon. Welcome back from the July 4th holiday. Hope everybody had a safe and happy holiday and didn't blow off any of your fingers. As you can tell, there are still 10 here. That's because I did not handle fireworks. Fireworks, yikes. I'm just saying, not good. So, nonetheless, hope like I said, everybody had a safe and happy holiday. But we're back. We got plenty of news to go around. For example, we got, of course, Donald Trump on Fox News. Not actually on Fox News, which has happened a lot before, but Donald Trump goes after Fox News. Very interesting turn. Then we have, of course, Trump Trump voters thinking maybe Trump not such a good idea when it comes to manufacturing. No surprise. Then we've got progressives versus Nancy Pelosi. That's an interesting story. You're going to love that. We have, of course, we're going to talk about Jeffrey Epstein, the charges that happened over the weekend, the arrest. We also have Elijah al-Amin. What happened to him? Why are people calling for justice for Elijah? We're going to talk about that story that is super depressing, super sad. And then if we got time, we will talk about what's going on in the Amazon rainforest right now. So, no boy, there's a lot of stuff here that we're going to talk about. But before you do that, please like and share the stream. Very, very important that you do. I'm seeing a question in the chat. Oh, whoops. That was, okay. Anyway, I almost fell off the screen. Weird how that happens. Okay, but anyway, I'm seeing some questions about whether or not people are getting their badge for memberships. If you're a channel member of TYT Nation, that's this channel is, then you'll get that. If you're a member of the Young Turks, completely different. We're part of the same network, but if you join as a member of of the Young Turks or TYT, then you will not. Then that does not count as membership towards TYT Nation. They are completely different things. Because what we do here is, again, we're a partner channel. We're an affiliate. So Young Turks membership does not include TYT Nation membership. Again, two different things. We are working together because we're both progressive. We're both part of the network, and we're both interested in getting a progressive message out there. But as far as, of course, being the same thing and having membership, for example, we have a Patreon that goes to us, that goes to me to support the show, to support the channel. Young Turks has a membership program through their site. We do not see any of that. We do not get any investment from the main channel or anything like that. So we are truly self-funded here. So that's something to kind of remember, and something that I do have to periodically point out. I don't mind pointing that out. That again, they're two different entities. Okay. Anyway, so now that said, let's go to our Patreon. Thank a few patrons. I want to thank Angela, Shane McAndrew, Roberta Jansen, Daniel Takara, Swerner, Robert Lemons, Francis Carroll, and Crystal Rose. So thank you to those patrons. Patreon.com/TYT Nation. That's how you can support TYT Nation. That's how you can support this exact show. All right, guys. So now let's slide into the first segment here. All right. All right. Not even Fox News is safe from the ire of President Trump. Now, on Sunday, the president attacked Fox News and its reporting in a series of tweets, even going so far as to claim that the network is, quote, changing fast. Changing fast into what? Apparently, he thinks maybe Fox News has gotten a little too liberal. I know, right? Shocker. And says that they're forgetting the people who got them there. Got them where? To being, and I say this because it's factual information, not because I like it. That Fox News is one of the, is the number one rated news television station in the country. That is a fact. It is a sad fact when you think about it, but it is a fact. Now, of course, you can go into some commentary about how cable news is dying, how, literally, in this case, the average age of a Fox News viewer is somewhere between 69 to 72. So they are literally dying out, but so is most of cable, which skews much, much older than the internet. Now, that said, let me get some of the tweets here. We'll start up with this one, where Trump said, "Watching Fox News weekend anchors is worse than watching low-ratings fake news CNN." Or Lion Brian Williams. Wow. Okay. And then it goes into how Brian Williams, of course, totally fabricated a war story trying to make himself into a hero and got fired. A very dishonest journalist, he says. So let me just stop there. He's actually right about Brian Williams. I do not like Brian Williams. It's not anything like super personal. I just don't like his style or what he does. I mean, or even the fact, because I go back and hate him for a completely different reason than obviously Donald Trump, or apparently Donald Trump does. When Donald Trump was launching strikes against Syria, Brian Williams was sitting back calling that the view of the missiles exiting the silo, and then, right before they hit their targets, calling them beautiful. Those missiles went on to kill people. That's not beautiful. That's horrendous. So instantly, any sort of respect that you might have for Brian Williams, and I didn't have much to begin with, to be honest with you, at least until I started learning more about cable news and really kind of how they operate and how they prop up the establishment, vaporized, gone. Anybody who thinks that that's beautiful, I'm not interested in, okay? So look, you want to go after Brian Williams, call him Lion Brian Williams. That's absolutely fine. Again, that ridiculous story when he was in the helicopter, but he actually wasn't in the helicopter, whatever, right? That's also terrible and ridiculous. But then again, when it's Donald Trump calling out hypocrisy and calling up and saying that you're a liar, a little bit of hypocrisy on his part too, because Donald Trump lies every single moment of every single day, almost, a lot of times per day. Why are you always lying, Donald Trump? But anyway, now he continues. He says, "And this crew of degenerate Comcast, NBC, MSNBC Trump haters who do whatever Brian and Steve tell them to do." Brian and Steve. Those are the two people apparently at Fox News. Brian and Steve. Or is he still talking about NBC? I don't know. It's word salad. I don't know what he's talking about. But he says, like CNN, NBC is also way down in the ratings, because it's all he cares about. But Fox News, who failed in getting the very boring Dem debates, is now loading up with Democrats and even using faked, unsourced New York Times as a source of information. He also said, ask the Times what they paid for the Boston Globe and what they sold it for. Lost $1.5 billion. Or their old headquarters building, disaster. Or their unfunded liability. Fox News is changing fast, but they forgot the people who got them there. Okay, so he goes on a screed, first against Fox News, and then against NBC, MSNBC, while also saying, I'd rather watch CNN than the Fox Weekend lineup. If you remember the Fox Weekend lineup, ouch. Sad. But look, there's a lot to break down here, okay? Now, as far as the Democrats, right? So, no, they're stacking Democrats. They're bringing in the Democrats. Really? Okay. Now, for one, Fox News, there is one reason that Fox News brings on Democrats, and that is to get pummeled by Fox hosts. We have seen it over and over again. Remember the resident liberal Bob Beckel? I mean, come on, dude. Really? That's the kind of guy that Fox News loves to bring on. Just people who get beat up all the time. Now, they did make one mistake. They brought on Kyle Kulinski for a segment and proceeded to get slaughtered. Is there any wonder why they didn't invite Kyle back? As far as I know, they haven't invited Kyle back. Gee, I wonder why. Could it be that he handed them their ass? No, Fox News, and let's be fair, CNN as well, they don't like when the left fights back. And that's what progressives do. So it is kind of funny that Donald Trump's complaining about the Democrats they bring on. And again, Fox News isn't going to bring on a progressive, especially with, what happened with Kyle and any of the other progressives that they bring on that actually fight back. They're not interested in that at all. Now, he also went after the New York Times, as you saw in that tweet. He said, the fake and unsourced New York Times. Well, now, he was responding to a story about some of the conditions inside of the detention center in Clint, Texas. Now, this is a facility that Congress people had visited, including Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And, of course, what they found in that facility is that there was rampant disease, overcrowding, lack of sanitation, people told to drink out of toilets, horrifying conditions that no human should be able to should be subjected to. Least of all, migrants that were, that are legal asylum seekers. These are people that haven't broken any laws. But what's funny is that in his, ranting against the New York Times, started talking about their old headquarters, right? The old headquarters, unfunded liabilities. What? What are you talking about? And first of all, what's the proof that the story that they put out is fake and unsourced? Oh, you don't have any proof, so you're going to go after their headquarters or whatever. Point out some ridiculous things. I mean, come on, man. Trump also tweeted, the fake news media, in particular the failing New York Times, is writing phony and exaggerated accounts of the border detention centers. No, it's not phony, not exaggerated. Again, we've had people, Congress people, that visited those facilities. Has Donald Trump visited that facility? No. No, of course not. Now, does this mean that Donald Trump is never watching Fox News again? No, of course not. It's ridiculous. No, look, to show you, Donald Trump still hate watches CNN and probably still hate watches Morning Joe. I'm not kidding. Now, for the New York Times, yeah, he's not going to read the New York Times. But to be fair, he's never read the New York Times. You know why? Because that would involve actually reading something for a change. And he does not do that. And besides, he still has love affairs with, other Fox hosts, including Tucker Carlson, whom he actually takes along on trips now. I mean, that should be a bigger story. Him taking Tucker Carlson, who occasionally does have a good point, to be fair, to trips to North Korea with him. I mean, that's insanity. And then, of course, you have Sean Hannity, whom Donald Trump also loves. So I don't think that relationship is going anywhere. But it really does kind of show you how thin of a skin he really has. Even criticism, slight criticism, or not even criticism, but using a source that he doesn't like is enough to turn him against a network that, by and large, for the most part, kisses his ass. That's how petty President Trump really is, and how completely and utterly uninterested in factual information he is. When Fox News is saying, these reports seem pretty credible, and we're going to use this as a source in some of our stories and some of our reporting, and Donald Trump doesn't like that, it shows you who he really is. Okay. Moving on. That should work, but it's not. I am pushing buttons, and it is not working. There we go. Took a minute for it to kick in. Sometimes that happens. All right. Now we have another couple of cases of regrets from people who voted for Donald Trump. Yes, surprisingly, there are people who voted for Donald Trump who aren't necessarily, people who are racist. We call those people the brick throwers, right? So what they did is that they're tired of getting crushed by the establishment, and they decided to throw a brick into the system. That brick was named Donald Trump, and the hopes for there would be change. These are some of the people that also probably would have voted for somebody like Senator Bernie Sanders because he represents change. Now, what's important about this story is that these brick throwers, they do it for they voted for Trump for a reason, as I said, for change because the status quo wasn't working. Now, one of the issues that Donald Trump successfully campaigned on, especially in the Rust Belt, is manufacturing. He said he was going to save manufacturing, he was going to bring manufacturing jobs back, and the blue-collar jobs and lifestyle with it. So now, that's what he promised to do in the campaign. And fast forward a couple of years. What's happened? Well, you could say that he's partly successful, but also not successful. So let me kind of break that down. So according to some of the numbers, American manufacturers have added nearly 500,000 jobs since Donald Trump took office. Oh, okay, well, that's interesting, right? Now, for the last 19 months in a row, now that's actually a really long streak. It's one of the longest streaks since the mid-1990s. So, okay, you could point to that and say, okay, look, hey, wow, look, Donald Trump bringing back those manufacturing jobs. But wait a minute. At the same time, and I think there's correlation here, you also had the massive weakening of labor rights in the form of course, bills like right to work, for example, in Michigan. And of course, Wisconsin, and that happened during the Obama administration, by the way. Now, I thought Obama was going to get his walking shoes and walk the picket line. Of course he didn't. You know who's been walking the picket line? Senator Bernie Sanders. Not saying anything. I'm just saying. Now, as I said, labor rights have been weakened. Wage growth is essentially flat. Why? Because what modest wage growth there has been because of the so-called booming economy has actually been eliminated due to inflation. And you also had announced job cuts by many of these large manufacturers who are still cutting jobs even though they receive massive tax cuts from Donald Trump. Now you look at that, and suddenly that boom isn't such a boom anymore, and in fact could be on its way to turning into a bust. Now, let me give you some examples of recent layoffs here. GM had announced the closure of a plant in Lordstown, Ohio last year, which would eliminate about 1,700 jobs. Carrier, in 2016, I believe, laid off 1,400 after it moved to Mexico following a deal with Trump and Pence that saved them $7 million in taxes. They made this deal and then announced later, oops, we're still going to Mexico even after we, saved all of this money in taxes. You also have Harley-Davidson that's expected to lay off about 800 people by the fall. Now you look at those are just some examples of manufacturing that has decided to cut back, even after, again, receiving billions of dollars in tax breaks, about $1.5 trillion in total. That's how much your Trump tax cuts cost. 83% of that went to giant corporations. So now, nobody knows the uncertainty or the problems facing these people who are working in the industry than the workers themselves, right? So now they sat down, a couple of them, and talked to the New York Times. Now this was during a Sunday show called The Weekly, and some Trump supporters have expressed frustration at losing their jobs or these job cuts. Now, New York Times reporter Sabrina Tavernise quoted one worker who said, quote, "It seems like no matter what he does or tries to do, it doesn't work out." So now that's a bit more, of course, pro-Trump, like, oh, he's trying, he's doing all this stuff to try to save manufacturing jobs, and it just isn't working. Okay, so you could say that maybe he's inept. But I don't even think that's entirely fair because, again, it's the president, yes, who proposes and of course, enforces laws and does he doesn't actually come up with the actual policies. Now, he could use the bully pulpit to try to, get public pressure on Congress to pass policies that might help, actual struggling workers. But in reality, the president just doesn't do everything alone. Yes, there is the power of executive orders, but they only go so far, right, when it comes to the economics of the country. So now, nonetheless, people tend to put more, I think, stock in the power of the presidency than he actually has. He or she, right? So now, let's get to more quotes here from the same person. He said, well, now what? What the heck do we do? Do we go back to beating our heads against a wall, or do we try something different? So now, again, I think this was somebody who tried to throw a brick into the establishment and was like, hey, what's going on isn't working, all right? And so we voted for Trump. We voted for change. We didn't get change. We got more establishment. The rich continue to get richer, and the poor continue to get poorer. And basically, the corporations are getting all the gains. All right. So now that's reflected in another person who was actually named. This is Rick Marsh, who voted for Trump in 2016. He said, quote, I'm sure you had more people around here voting for Trump, including myself, because he promised to bring jobs back. We need competitive manufacturing jobs. I really don't care if it's a Democrat or Republican, female, black, white. I don't care. Whoever's in there, you need to put American workers first and Americans working first. And let me tell you, we're not doing that, right? So now what we're doing here is, again, giving tax cuts to corporations, multinationals, who usually end up moving to low-wage countries like Vietnam, China, etc. Now, look, I work in manufacturing, right? I have family that works in manufacturing, so I kind of have a perspective here, right? So what's going on today, unfortunately, at least where I live, is you have mostly temp workers. Now, these temp workers have low pay, no benefits, and they end up getting treated like garbage a lot of the time. Now, that's been my experience. I have worked in that situation before. And, of course, unsurprisingly, I should say, usually happens in non-unionized shops, which right now union participation is at its lowest point, I believe, in U.S. history. So no representation, lots of temp workers, no low pay, no benefits. That's, I think, where a lot of these manufacturing jobs have come from. It's not the super high paying jobs of yesteryear, which is unfortunately what these people want back, which is what Donald Trump had promised to bring back, and unfortunately what is not going to come back. Now, as for the uncertainty, as for these workers, I understand them because I've been them. I was them. I have felt that uncertainty. I have been angry at layoffs. I've been laid off before. I have been treated like garbage by an employer. So I understand how it all feels. And in my experiences, I have learned that they don't care about you. Again, multinational corporations, right? Part of why I got into politics in the first place is because of how people like me have been treated and have absolutely no voice in politics. Even through some of the unions, which, again, I'm a staunch supporter of unions. I don't always agree with what they do. And I definitely don't always just see eye to eye with union leadership. A lot of the leadership is also disconnected from that of the workers. And you can see for the ones, of course, that, for example, allied themselves behind Hillary Clinton, were in favor of the Keystone XL pipeline because it meant jobs, but obviously not as much. And I've talked about this before. It did not necessarily mean or the jobs that were promised by the Obama administration, even, those job numbers were false. There were never going to be that many permanent jobs. Some temporary jobs, yes, but it would have been a disaster for the environment. Unions backed that, and I completely oppose that decision. So unions aren't always 100% correct, but in reality, we need them because workers need representation because, again, I've experienced what it's like to be in places that have no representation, and it's terrible. And that's unfortunately what we have today. So now, let me get to another quote here. Marsh had said, quote, "They're going to get to a point into this country where people have had enough." Well, to be fair, I think we're already there. And he said, without the ability to feed my family or pay for my children and feed my children, what am I as a man? So now that statement, that kind of hits me right here, right? I feel that in my core. Now, again, me now kind of thinks, but wait, your worth is not defined in how much you bring home and where you work, right? And that's unfortunately a bigger conversation when it comes to, how Americans view themselves, work ethic, etc., right? But I've learned that your worth as a person is not tied to a dollar figure or how much you work. Your worth as a person is completely independent of that. But again, I feel that, right? I understand that when you're not working, when you can't find work, when you can't bring in, when you can't take care of your family, that's depressing. And it literally does cause depression. I mean, if you go from $30 an hour, which is the typical line worker wage at GM, to what, $8 an hour, $8.50 an hour at maybe a fast food place, $7.25 is the federal minimum wage, or $12 to $13 at most for a factory job, at least around my area. Well, you go from that to that. Oh, that's devastating. Not only to your pocketbook, but to your self-esteem as well. And so these people, they're living it. And Donald Trump has done nothing to boost wages or save a lot of the jobs that are leaving. In fact, he might be the cause of some of these jobs leaving. His trade policies, for example, is one thing that Harley-Davidson had cited when they were leaving. So, and of course that's tariffs. Part of it's tariffs, which are a tax that's paid by the consumer. But he's also made it cheaper to move overseas. I tell you, if manufacturing does fall off between now and the election, well, then that could actually hurt Donald Trump's chances with his own base. But what's more important, other than that, is what we do for the workers. And that brings me to the future of manufacturing. I don't think a lot of those high-paying manufacturing jobs are going to come back. In fact, I think they're not coming back. Automation is going to take over, and we need to plan for that, and we need to talk about that. And unfortunately, there are very few people that are talking about that. There is one that I know of for certain, that's Andrew Yang. Now, I'm not saying I'm on the Yang gang or anything like that, but he is one person that is talking about that. And whether you agree with it or not, the plan to, give $1,000 to every person, to offset that manufacturing or loss of manufacturing, loss of these low-wage jobs due to automation, at least somebody's having a conversation. And I think more of these candidates and more politicians need to start having this conversation and have a plan for when there is automation that takes over. Because, like it or not, it is here to stay, and these jobs are not. Okay. So let's go Nancy Pelosi. Okay. Now, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is once again punching left after being criticized for backing Republicans. Now, in an interview with the New York Times columnist Maureen Dowd published on Saturday, Pelosi defended herself against criticism that she too often caves to Republicans and Donald Trump when it comes to legislation. Now, Pelosi's comments followed a quote from a spokesperson for Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, in a Washington op-ed. Now, you're going to love this quote. They said that, quote, "The greatest threat to mankind is the cowardice of the Democratic Party." Oh, damn. So let me give you some context into where that came from. Now, Pelosi, of course, had pushed to pass a Senate Republican bill that increased funding to deal with conditions at the U.S. border. Oh, now what's wrong with that? Well, it turns out that bill had no accountability. There was no humanitarian guarantees for detained immigrants, particularly children. So basically, she handed Donald Trump and the Republicans a blank check and said, well, we will trust that you will do the right thing. Now, I talked about that last week. Mitch McConnell, basically, she caved to Mitch McConnell, and most importantly, the other centrist Democrats who didn't want to look weak on the border. So it was a bit of an internal insurrection where you had a lot of these centrist, so-called moderate, but actually they're more Republicans than anything, Democrats that decided to go, no, we're not going to go with we're not going to go with our House bill, which actually has these protections built in, and that we had personally had a conversation with Mike Pence, who agreed to include some of these protection provisions. No, we're not going to do that. We're going to go with Mitch McConnell. We're going to give away all of our leverage to Mitch McConnell, the Grim Reaper, and let him basically have his way. And that's what Pelosi had pushed for. So, now after she was called out for this, here's what she told Maureen Dowd, quote, all these people have their public whatever and their Twitter world, but they didn't have any following. They're 4 people, and that's how many votes they got. Dripping with condescension towards progressives, towards Justice Democrats. It's not just AOC, it's, of course, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar. And look, these are the people that have been pushing the conversation to the left. It's incredibly important. And look, let's be honest. That bill got dozens of votes from Democrats, but it wasn't enough to overcome the Republicans that the centrist Democrats had teamed up with. Democrats have a majority in the House, right? But yet, they ended up pushing a Republican bill. How is it that the House, under Democratic leadership, pushes Republican legislation? I mean, that's what they're doing. Oh, right, it's because of Nancy Pelosi and the other centrists. Now, AOC shot back on Twitter, and this is great. She said, the public whatever is called public sentiment. Wielding the power to shift is how we actually achieve meaningful change in this country. She also added and explained her no vote on that piece of legislation that, quote, I don't believe it was a good idea for Democrats to blindly trust the Trump administration when so many kids have died in their custody. It's a huge mistake. This administration also refuses to hand over documents to Congress and the whereabouts of families. We still have families that were separated from their children that they have not been reunited, despite court orders mandating that they should have been reunited by now. And I believe it was, 10, 11 children now that have died in Border Patrol custody? These are people that don't care about the people that they're supposed to protect and care for. Remember, these people aren't criminals. They're seeking asylum, which is legal. That is perfectly legal to do. In fact, you have to be in the United States to claim asylum. Instead, because of Donald Trump and his zero-tolerance policy, we have basically thrown them into prison-like conditions. But in reality, Border Patrol and Health and Human Services are supposed to protect them and care for them. But as we found out, at least half of the roughly 20,000 U.S. border agents that are employed by the government might be racist. And we found that out due to internal Facebook groups where current and former Border Patrol agents came to do conversation with each other. And they'd post racist memes and stories about AOC, pictures about, our congresswomen and the migrants, some memes saying, let them die. I mean, just some horrible, horrible racist stuff. Now, Matt Stoller had an excellent tweet about this situation, about the bill especially, saying, this is a bet by Pelosi that AOC is wrong and that the Trump administration will do the right thing on the border with the money Congress just appropriated. Not a bet I'd make, but okay. So this is this is the mindset that frustrates me the most. It's the Obama, Joe Biden, centrist Democrat way of thinking. No, you don't understand. The right wing, totally not monstrous. No. You just have to get them to do the right thing, and they'll do it. And the fever will eventually break, and they'll come around if you give them everything that they want. No, that's not how that works. This is the party that locks children in cages and then defends the practice without batting an eye. You think they're going to come around? No, they're not. They're beholden to their monstrous base. There are people, and I'm not saying all of them, there are Republicans, conservatives, that delight in the suffering of these migrants. For them, the cruelty is the point. Well, you shouldn't have come here. You shouldn't have fled violence and poverty and governmental corruption to come here to America. Because if you do, we're going to punish you, and then we're going to take joy in it. I mean, that's disgusting. Again, they're not a majority of this country, right? But for them and the Trump administration, the cruelty is the point. It was supposed to, and their explanation is, it's supposed to be a deterrent to deter people from coming here illegally. Again, not illegally if you're claiming asylum, and it actually hasn't worked as a deterrent. But again, the cruelty is the point. Now, they're not a majority of this country. They're obviously not all Republicans, thankfully. But there is a Republican Party out there that does represent those people. And let's be honest about that. Now, Pelosi, she did go on to blame Mitch McConnell for this, whom she described as, quote, authentically terrible. She's not wrong. She goes on to say, with all due respect, the press likes to make a story that is more about Democrats divided than the fact that Mitch McConnell doesn't care about the children. Now, look, Nancy, Democrats are divided. Again, you have the people like the Blue Dog Democrats, the so-called Problem Solvers Caucus, which is made up of both moderate Democrats and Republicans, the corporate, Democratic establishment, and all the other centrist Democrats. They don't represent the will of the people, right? Those are the ones who sided with Mitch McConnell. And they are against the progressives. And instead of fighting for the majority of Americans, who, by the way, agree that the asylum seekers should be here and should be allowed to, petition for asylum and not be thrown in cages, well, they ended up losing because you had more centrist Democrats and Nancy Pelosi who decided to give up. Now, either that is incredible weakness by the supposed master legislator of the Democratic Party, or she is on their side. Still, she said this, and I love this quote because of how absurd it is, right? If the left doesn't think I'm left enough, so be it. As I say to these people, come to my basement. No, I will not go in Nancy Pelosi's basement. I'm afraid I'd never make it out again. But no, she says, I have these signs about single payer from 30 years ago. Oh, so you were for single payer 30 years ago. Well, I know another person who was for single payer that long ago, except he doesn't have signs in his basement. He's holding signs. In fact, he's campaigning all over the country to be president of the United States so that he can enact that policy. But what is Nancy Pelosi doing? Well, she's keeping stuff in her basement. You know what happens? You know what you can use basements for? To store things that you've killed. To hide things that you've killed. Like progressive legislation. My question is, if Nancy Pelosi is so progressive, then why are the signs in her basement and not in the forefront of this fight? Over 55% of Americans, and this is after all the attacks from centrist Democrats, mainstream media, and Fox News, right? 55% of the country wants a single-payer government insurance option. Government insurance that is guaranteed. Why is it not the forefront? Oh, right. It's because you don't actually believe in fighting for single-payer, which is why those signs will continue to stay buried in her basement along with other all the other progressive legislation that she has buried. I mean, whatever happened to introducing a living wage bill? Don't you guys remember that? She's like, oh, as soon as we take the House, within 100 days, we will introduce legislation for a living wage, $15 an hour. Where is it? Where is it? Oh, right. She hasn't done that. She backed down because that's what she does. She's not a progressive. She's not a fighter. What we need to do is to replace Nancy Pelosi with someone who will fight. If we don't, we're going to continue to get the same old establishment nothing. Okay. I'm going to take a break. We'll come back in a couple minutes. We've got Jeffrey Epstein. We'll talk about that story. And, of course, justice for Elijah. So, super sad story. We'll come back to that in a couple minutes around the nation. Welcome back to the show, Around the Nation, right here, TYT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. All right, so let me read some super chats from you guys. First, let me just thank Platypie for her super chat. Thank you so much. And then Mandy Sadowski says, love your show. Keep up the good work. Well, thank you so much, Mandy. I really appreciate that. You're awesome. You guys are amazing. And I can't thank you enough. All right, so let's read a couple of fun comments here. John Bliss points out that Sam Cedar, Michael Brooks nailed it on Ying's UBI flaws. Yeah, I'm going to have to watch that segment, but I think generally I agree that UBI okay, so it's a libertarian idea. And so already it's like, I don't know about that. Because the whole purpose is to just give someone give people a flat amount of money and then eliminate all other welfare programs. I don't know. Again, probably not a good idea. And there are issues and there are flaws with that. But, I mean, again, it's trying to start the conversation at least. And I think $1,000 a month is a conversation starter. And so that's sort of the whole point of why I said that. Tia Willer says, I have no intention in going in your basement, Pelosi. We don't want to know what kind of weird stuff you're interested in. I thought that was pretty funny. Let's see. Martin Trammell is a member. Says, maybe Nancy should bury herself in the basement. Ooh. Oh, that was bad. Okay. Let's see. Let's see. Zach Sherman says Pelosi and Schumer are paid for by the donors to not put up a fight. None of these people like them. Will fight for us. When was the last time they passed popular legislation? And then, of course, there was another comment that said, yeah, well, she got the Heritage Foundation plan. She was such a master legislator that she got the Heritage Foundation plan passed with 0 Republican votes. Ooh, devastating. Devastating. Okay. Also, there's some breaking news, not really too important. Eric Swalwell is jumping out of the race. Eric who? Right. Exactly. All right. So, let's move on. We got the Jeffrey Epstein story. So, let's kind of dive into that. Boom. Now, billionaire Jeffrey Epstein was arrested over the weekend in New York City involving sex trafficking charges. Now, one law enforcement official told the Associated Press that the case deals with allegations that Epstein had paid numerous underage girls for massages and molested them at his homes in Florida and New York. So now, earlier, Epstein had actually been brought to court and actually sentenced in Florida. However, they're taking another crack at it because, well, now the Southern District of New York is looking at these charges again. And the reason that they're doing that, as I'm going to explain here, has to do with, first of all, who actually made this deal and why. So now, one of the charges involved paying a girl young as 14 for sex, which is gross. Super, super gross. Now, Epstein, whose friends have included President Trump and former President Bill Clinton, as well as Great Britain's Prince Andrew, was arrested on Saturday at an airport near New York City after his private jet touched down from France. Now, a task force of federal agents and New York City police officers met the plane at Teterboro Airport and took Epstein into custody. Now, he has not been released. He's still currently being held without bail. Why? Because he's a flight risk. Former federal prosecutor David Weinstein said that there's almost no chance Epstein will allowed to go home after the hearing. He said, quote, "The government is clearly seeking to have him detained. The guy's a millionaire or billionaire. He has unrestrained assets. If they let him out on bond, he may take off, go to a jurisdiction where they don't have extradition, and they may never get him back." So now that makes a lot of sense that they would deem him a flight risk. He has, again, all of those assets and definitely a motive to skip the country. So Southern District of New York here is actually doing a really smart thing by denying him bail. Now, it's not the first time, by the way, Epstein has gotten in trouble for this. Epstein's arrest, first reported by the Daily Beast, came amid increased scrutiny of the 2008 non-prosecution deal that allowed Epstein to plead guilty to lesser state charges instead of federal charges, which, by the way, that's what they're revisiting. Now, they can't revisit the Florida state case because that would violate double jeopardy. But since this happened in New York, now the federal government can now go after him with federal charges related to what happened in New York. Now, why did they let Epstein go with a plea deal the first time? Well, I think it's very obvious. He's rich. He's rich. Now, of course, this is under scrutiny because he got off so lightly for basically doing the same thing, right? Molesting underage girls for money because of who authorized that deal. And that deal was overseen by former Miami U.S. Attorney and current Trump Labor Secretary, Alexander Acosta. That is why currently Acosta is being basically pressured to resign from the Trump administration. Who knew that it would be Epstein that could bring down Alexander Acosta? Now, in it, Epstein avoided a life sentence and served 13 months in jail after pleading guilty to Florida charges of soliciting and procuring a person under the age of 18 for prostitution. Now, it also required he reach financial settlements with dozens of victims and register as a sex offender, which, by the way, for a billionaire, pretty easy for him to do. So he got off basically with a slap on the wrist. Now, the deal is being challenged in Florida federal court. U.S. District Judge Kenneth Mara of Florida ruled earlier this year that Epstein's victims should have been consulted under federal law about that deal, and now is weighing to whether or not he should be able to invalidate that deal. There are no double jeopardy implications because Epstein's guilty plea involved only state crimes, while the current case involves federal law, as I explained earlier. Now, this is the details of the case. According to court records, authorities say that at least 40 underage girls were brought into Epstein's Palm Beach mansion for what turned into sexual encounters after female fixers looked for suitable girls locally and in Eastern Europe and other parts of the world. So this is global. This is a global sex trafficking ring. Some of the girls were allegedly brought to Epstein's homes in New York City, New Mexico, and a private Caribbean island, according to court documents. So now the Epstein is saying, oh, no, I'm not guilty of any of this. Yeah, okay, man. Now, he's gross, he's a predator, but he's a very wealthy predator. And so, of course, previously, he really didn't have to face all that much justice. And after he was done, 13 months in jail, he can go back to continuing to, victimize young women, young girls. And you can thank Alexander Acosta. Now, what's even more interesting is if they do decide to go forward with a federal case, then it could lead to other interesting side effects, not just actually getting justice for what Epstein had done, basically pimping out preteen or young teen girls. But okay, so this could lead to some very interesting side effects, right? In an interview Sunday morning on MSNBC, Miami Herald scribe Julie Brown said that this case could end up being explosive. How so? Needless to say, she said, these are very powerful people, and I think that they're sweating a little bit, especially today. We don't know how deep this went, how far-reaching it went in government, but there have been a lot of names that I could see in these message pads listing clients on a regular basis as part of the evidence. These message pads where they could call and leave Epstein messages, such as, I'm at this hotel. Why do you do that unless you're expecting him to send you a girl to visit you at your hotel? So now that is very important. So it's not just about what Epstein had done, but how wide-reaching his possible client base was and how much it was in government. I mean, this is some crazy stuff. If there are people in government who had actually used this service, who had sexual relations with these underage girls, who hooked up with Jeffrey Epstein to be able to do so, that's huge. Now, she said, we'll have to wait and see whether Epstein is going to name names to lower his culpability. And two of Epstein's very high-profile friends happen to be Donald Trump and Bill Clinton. Yikes. Now, for Trump, they went to dinner parties at each other's houses. Trump was also on his plane, probably not as much as other people because, Trump had his own plane, but they had a lot of social relationships. And the other interesting thing is Trump had a modeling agency, and Epstein also had a stake in a modeling agency, which they suspect he used to bring in underage girls from overseas. There's a comment in one of the court files where Epstein is quoted as saying, I want to set up my modeling agency the same way Trump set up his modeling agency, taking a lot of course, foreign girls. I don't know what that means, but it's curious that he was trying to do something similar to Trump. So that was Brown. Now, look, I'm not saying Trump did anything illegal that we know of. Just knowing Epstein doesn't necessarily make you a criminal. That said, Donald Trump has just been accused of another rape. And there's also the question, of course, is if Trump, even if he didn't do anything, which we don't know, and it is very possible, there's also the question if Trump knew any of this was going on. If he did, Could he not be an accessory to this? So I can understand why certain people might be nervous about this, especially if Epstein tries to talk to lower his sentence. That's, of course, I'm going a little bit ahead because, I mean, we don't know if they're actually going to revisit this case using federal law instead. I hope so, because at the end of the day, I want justice for these victims. But it also is pretty interesting who might be a little bit nervous now for this news. We'll have to see. Okay. Moving on. And I'm sorry, before I get into that, there's two recent allegations against Donald Trump now of rape. There was that writer, and then apparently there was a 19-year-old. I cannot keep up with Donald Trump's rape allegations. That's bad. Okay, now moving on. One last story here. An Arizona man has been arrested on the charge of murder for killing a young man for playing rap music. Here we go again. Now, on Thursday, police in Peoria, Arizona, charged 27-year-old Michael Paul Adams with first-degree premeditated murder of a young 17-year-old man named Elijah al-Amin. Now, Adams allegedly slit the boy's throat, stabbed him with a pocket knife at a local gas station, a Circle K. So now, this is already super, super horrendous, right? So now, Superior Court records say that Adams had told investigators that he had felt threatened by the music the teen was playing. He wasn't really, and this is what he told prosecutors. He wasn't threatened by the teenager. He wasn't threatened by Elijah al-Amin. No, it's just the rap music that was a threat. Well, then why didn't you stab the rap music or the radio? Why did you stab the teen? I mean, come on, dude, really? No, he explained that people who play rap music are the real threat to him and his community. Now, he also reportedly said that the murder was being proactive and not reactive. So again, it basically admitting to, premeditated murder. But he said it's because rap makes him feel unsafe because he had been attacked by people who had listened to rap music before. I mean, wow. Now, more details about this. When it had happened, al-Amin had finished working his shift at Subway at 11 p.m., visiting his girlfriend before heading to the Circle K around 1:40 a.m. Surveillance footage from the convenience store, al-Amin walking into the store, followed by Adams a few seconds later. After Adams allegedly stabbed the teenager, al-Amin ran out of the store where he collapsed near the gas tanks. He was transported to a nearby hospital, pronounced dead around 2:05 a.m. on Thursday. After a brief search, the cops claimed they found Adams covered in blood and reportedly admitting that he was involved in the killing. Oh, no, he was involved. No, he did it. He did it. Now, here's what's funny, right? So now, nothing in the story is funny, actually, but here's the ironic part, I guess. So now Adams, he's like, rap music. It's so unsafe for my community. Well, you know what's unsafe for the community? Apparently this guy. He has a criminal history that includes theft, disorderly conduct, assault with a weapon, and an assault on a corrections officer. That's his record. Oh, no, but it's the rap music. It's the people who play rap music that's unsafe for my community and for me. I don't feel safe around that music. No. I don't feel safe around people like Adams. You're the one who makes everyone else feel unsafe. I mean, this is a horrible story. Now, Adams' attorney said he had no access, and this is where it goes apparently to mental health. He said he had no access to mental health services after he was released, although a statement from Arizona Department of Corrections spokesperson said that Adams was, quote, not designated as seriously mentally ill. So that's part of their defense that they're going to use. Adams, the guy was mentally ill. I mean, he attacked that teen because there's something wrong with him. Funny how they would never use that excuse if it came to a black person or, a Muslim or anyone of color if they were to do something similar. No, this was premeditated. It was murder. And that's what it is. And this guy should be punished appropriately. Michael Paul Adams. Now, I'm not saying give him the death penalty, which I'm pretty sure that's what they do in Arizona. I'm against the death penalty, but I'd be more than happy with throwing him in prison for life. I think the mental illness is probably an excuse, but again, I don't necessarily know for sure, as I'm not a mental health professional. What I do know is that he's being held on a $1 million bond. And what I also know is that Elijah al-Amin had done nothing wrong. He's an innocent victim in all of this for playing, what, rap music? It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Now, his father told KVOA in an interview he was a good kid. He wanted to be hotel management. He wanted to move to Seattle. He wanted to move to different places. Basically, he wanted to live life. I mean, that's it. And it was robbed from him because of somebody who seems to be incredibly racist. If you're afraid of rap music, the best explanation is that you're a definite racist. Sad story. Okay. All right. That's all I got for you guys. Thank you for going around the nation with me. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Like us on Facebook as well, because we stream every day. We post videos there as well. So thank you to the Facebook crowd. Thank you to, of course, our YouTube live audience. You guys are fantastic. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you guys tomorrow.